there are fundamentals that just exist. One of them is identifying your target market. Saying that I want to sell to the government is akin to saying that I want to sell to men. Okay, which ones?
Right.
Think of like a fitness coach, and he's like, I want to sell my fitness program to men. Like, that's cool that you've identified a population that isn't everyone, so that's nice.
Yeah.
But is it men 50 and over? Is it dietary? Is it nutrition? Is it physical exercise? Is it, and so there's so many things, so many components to kind of niche down. And so this is the same thing, but niching down with inside the government. What are we talking about today?
Government contracting 101, or how to make the government your customer.
Yes. Yeah, that can be really daunting, or it can be perceived as being really easy. And so it's going to be fun to go through these different kind of perspectives.
Right.
To put things into context for people, I did a little bit of research specifically across the U.S. because I know that we have a broad audience. So we're going to do a little trivia game. Are you ready?
Love it. Yep.
Okay, it's the best. Are you
I'm
excited?
So excited.
Me
to do
too.
this.
Okay, so if you were to guess in fiscal year 23, what percentage of U.S. federal contract dollars were awarded to small businesses? So this is across the U.S. U.S. federal contracts.
Okay.
Percentage-wise.
Percentage. I'm going to say 25%.
You know what 25% is? 25% is a quarter. See what I did?
I mean, make this guy a host of a podcast. It's genius.
It's actually the goal. That was the goal for small business contracts in the United States for federal contracts. So that was the goal. The question is, did we meet? Did we fall, or did we exceed? Amazingly, we exceeded 26.5%. So you were spot on. You were right there. You nailed the target. And then we did, and that I think that was that the 9% increase? No, that was a different thing. But that was an increase, and it has been increasing year over year, which just goes to show the importance of the topic that we're talking about, because the opportunities are there, and not only are they there, they're not sitting stagnant, they're not like reducing, they're growing. So there's more and more opportunities out there. And to put this into further perspective, if you were to look at that and to guess again, actually, Sarah, I'm bringing you in on trivia.
Stop
This is so much more of a difficult question.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for that.
It's because you're my favorite.
I can feel it all the way from over here.
So if you were to translate that into dollars.
Oh my God.
Math?
Why do we think that I would even have a remotely close?
All right, open it up to Lauren too. You can save. You can phone a friend.
Yeah, can I phone my procurement advisor, please?
What would you say, Lauren, if you were to guess like the dollar amount that would turn out to be?
Well, I know.
Oh, do you know?
I know that the federal government, and correct me if I'm wrong,
lay it on me,
purchases $665 billion a year in goods and services.
Ooh.
Was that for 2023? Or was that 2022?
I think it was 22, but I don't think it was that far off.
Okay.
23. That's a Sarah check.
So it would be 25% of that, which whatever that is.
Oh, let's find out.
Yeah.
All right. Sarah, you're going to have to do this math.
26%.
Yeah.
What am I doing math on? Exactly.
So the dollar amount that these contracts added up to in total of the 26.5%, what that equals in dollars is $163 billion. And so that's across the United States. That's for all of the contracts that were awarded. But that's not a small number.
No.
And you could think if there's $163 billion going out in a one fiscal year, like how difficult would it be for you to pick up $100,000? And how much would a $100,000 contract change the trajectory of your business?
Well, so how hard is it? That's an interesting question.
It is an interesting question. And that's why we're here today.
Yes. There are people on YouTube, the platform that we're on, that will tell you it's extremely easy to get the 100,000.
That's true.
It's extremely easy to get $1 million. I am here to bring some reality to those videos.
She's a heartbreaker.
Yes, I'm so sorry to be the bearer of bad news. It's not easy, but there's a way to do it.
Right.
And we are here to help businesses
That's exactly it.
figure it out.
Yeah, and because there are misconceptions. So maybe we'll start with just laying some baseline information out there. Starting with, is government contracting, or let's frame it this way: who is government contracting good for?
Mm-hmm.
And there's kind of two different perspectives to take on this. Some people are entering into this and they see some videos or they hear somebody talking about it and they don't have a business yet, but they have a business idea. And so they see the opportunity through government contracting, so they understand that the government needs a lot of things, and they're like, they think that they can supply those.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the perspective of somebody that's already in business and trying to determine if that's a good fit.
Right.
And so you could start with either one of those or however you want to handle that. But I think that those are the two tracks in this area that I'd like to cover.
Yeah, like a good rule of thumb for any business is to be in business for at least a year.
That's good.
You need to have past performance regardless of what you're doing. You need to have the experience, the knowledge of the industry,
Mm-hmm.
and just the foundation of your business to really then move into government contracting, which can be a little bit more difficult, more paperwork heavy,
Right.
more regulations, and you just want to have that solid foundation before you jump into anything.
Yeah, it's a year can sound like a long time. But if you think about all of the different systems within your business, especially if you haven't started yet, think about everything that you have to get worked out. You can even come in and you can work with us to help develop your business plan, to help to identify who your target market is, how you're going to market to them, how you're going to sell, how you're going to fulfill on what you sell in your services or products or goods. And then you go out into the real world and you go to execute on the plan. And like Mike Tyson says, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to happen to everybody that's in business. You're going to run into an unforeseen problem. And, one characteristic of people that do well is their level of perseverance and their ability to problem solve.
Mm-hmm.
And so the combination of those things are what you're going to figure out, and you're going to be solving these problems, and you're going to be overcoming hurdles during your first year. You're going to figure out, oh, okay, well, the website is down, that people can't fulfill orders on there, or like I was doing my invoices incorrectly. Well, all of these things you're going to figure out, and you don't want to be figuring this out. Like, what's the difference? I guess here's a question. What's the difference of getting something like that wrong when you're doing B2B versus B2G?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the worst thing in the world is it isn't not getting a contract. It's getting a contract and not being able to fulfill it, because you could be blacklisted from that agency, from that level of government.
That's real.
It's real.
That's real.
It's real.
That's
And you
scary.
don't want that to happen. You want to be in a position where you have a good reputation,
Mhm.
where you fulfill one contract that leads to another and to another. If you can fulfill a contract that you're awarded, I mean, it just doesn't look good.
It can be difficult enough to get into that space because people do believe that, it's common that you're seeking a contract and you're not finding them, and this is a terrible experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, then on the flip side, it's, to your point, it's so much worse if you get that contract and you can't fulfill.
Yeah.
And then all of the gateways are shut off to you
Right.
after that.
Right.
And so
Or
if
there
you-
may even be penalties. Like,
wow.
so you don't want to be in a position.
Penalties. Like what? Like how does that work?
Like monetary
Ooh,
penalties,
buddy.
debarment. I mean, there's really, really, it's just, you don't want to be in that position. You want to
Mhm.
make sure your business has that foundation, has
Mhm.
funding, has
Mhm.
people, and also has knowledge of the space you're in. A very common thing that people come for government contracting is selling commodities, selling products, right? How hard is it to get some toilet paper and sell it to the government, right?
Right.
And I understand that. But you have to think your bid is going to be compared to everyone else
Mm.
that bids. So,
Yeah, you're not leaving the open, like private market, so to speak, and and entering into something that's just blue ocean, that's just wide open, green fields and pastures, and my competition's gone because everyone's out there. No.
no, everyone is there with their pricing
Right.
and you're being compared to everyone else. So if you're getting your toilet paper from Costco and you're competing against a Charmin who's manufacturing it in their factory, you're not going to be able to ever compete with that.
Right.
So you need to know your industry and who are your competitors, what is their pricing, and where do you fit in? That's something that I always talk about with clients. Where do you see yourself fitting in? And you may think of something that is actually really an amazing way to fit into government contracting. So I had someone who made jewelry. And to me, my first reaction is, I don't know where you fit in government. I don't know if the government's buying jewelry.
Right.
But she had heard that the army, military, they needed their what are they called? The decorative.
Yeah, there's accoutrements and awards and decorations. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
And that's where she fit in. And
Wow.
she executed on that
Wow.
and did well. So that's to say, if you see a way forward and you know that there are contracts out there for you, you know, what's amazing about government contracting is it's all public. You can look and see and research.
That goes to the level of creativity and problem solving we were talking about before. If you're making jewelry, right, you have your business infrastructure laid out in the systems and processes in place to create jewelry. And so if you see a similar need where like your infrastructure can just be modified, this is what we saw during COVID too, when
Right.
people shifted like their plastic manufacturing to shift it to making like the curved face masks, and other people were doing it with just the normal face masks with cloth. All of these different components that people were taking their current manufacturing and shifting it to the demands of the marketplace.
Yeah.
And so this is the same thing, but you're shifting it to the demands of the government marketplace, which is different.
Right. It's different. And it's also about thinking, all right, this is not going to be a full-time revenue source for me. It's not going to be 100% of my revenue. It's going to be a part of it. So maybe in my business plan, I'm going to dedicate 60% of my time to my B2B customers and then another portion of time to my government customers. And it's not going to be a majority of it.
What a point.
You know?
What a point. Like, and to plan it out that way too, to understand, especially in the contracting space, because what you had mentioned before, like you win a contract, you fulfill it, it's complete, everyone's happy, you get another contract and you go. Sometimes it's not that smooth.
Right.
Sometimes you get that contract and you're living on cloud nine, and then where's the next one?
Right. Right. And where do you go from there? And and also looking around you, right? This is another part of it, of saying, where do I live and where are my customers?
Mm-hmm.
So we live in New York. We live very close to New York City.
Yep.
So New York City is going to be a major place to look for those government contracts and everything surrounding what New York City needs.
I got more stats specifically for the city. I'm so happy that you went there.
Yeah.
So this was crazy. In fiscal year 23, goods and services there were 147,000 transactions in New York City, not state, in New York City. 147,000 transactions specifically in the procurement space with small businesses. And of those, what that resulted in money-wise was $41.1 billion in the city alone.
Huge.
And that's, I believe, if I remember reading correctly, the mayor, Eric Adams, had put out the goal that it was to be 60 billion. Like that's like the next benchmark. And so again, increase.
Yeah.
And so I guarantee you, if you live around a large metropolitan area, super easy to look up, to
Right.
figure out like what their goals are, what they're trying to accomplish when it comes to supporting small businesses, when it comes to procurement within the city, because that's a whole nother layer to it too.
Right. Right. And a lot of my clients are looking to the city. They're looking at the metropolitan area, the airports, right? We are also by a transit hub. So, but you may,
Couple of them.
right. But you may live in an area where you're not near a city,
Right.
right? But maybe you're near a military base.
Yes.
So while my clients are focused on maybe local procurement, city procurement, you may be in an area where you're focused on federal procurement. So what level of government are you going to be focusing on? These are all questions to ask so that you're not marketing or looking at thousands of agencies and who to sell to, but you're kind of more focused and saying, all right, is federal government my customer? Is the city my customer? Who is my ideal customer and how do I get to them?
It's the correlations to just kind of the standard business practices and outside of government are enormous.
Mhm.
And so like there are fundamentals that just exist. One of them is identifying your target market.
Right.
And the government is saying that I want to sell to the government is akin to saying that I want to sell to men.
Right.
You're like, okay, which ones?
Right.
You know, think of like a fitness coach and he's like, I want to sell my fitness program to men. Like that's cool that you've identified a population that isn't everyone.
Mhm.
So that's nice.
Yeah.
But is it men 50 and over? Is it dietary? Is it nutrition? Is it physical exercise? Is it, you know, and so there's so many things, so many components to kind of niche down. And so this is the same thing, but niching down with inside the government.
Right. Because, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and like just backing up the point that you just made when it comes to looking around you physically, like what is physically around you.
Right.
You know, if you have the trifecta, if you're in Georgia or South Carolina, North Carolina, this area, there are so many military installations. And like, by all means, like get in contact with these people.
Right. Right. And so if you say, you know what, I live near a military base, I want to sell to that base, that federal government's my customer, that will also inform your entire strategy of what certifications to get, where to look for opportunities, you know, what's your pricing going to be?
Right.
Because like I said, with the government, everything's public. You can research all of these things. So you can research what the federal government is buying,
Mm-hmm.
who they sold to, or who they, what the government is buying, who they bought from,
Right.
who's selling to them,
Yes.
and where. And this is all public information that
That's
you
insane.
can find.
Wow.
And so that could also inform your business plan of, you know, what should my pricing be? Who are my competitors? And what are the agencies that I'm going to sell to?
Where can people go to do that kind of research?
On the federal level, it's usaspending.gov. And then on the local levels,
You have to go to each state.
Yeah.
Right. And then if you go to your state's website and they'll have like usually they'll have that part, right? It's like, you can start your LLC, like fill this out here. There's
Right.
going to be maybe like a government procurement area, but you start, even if you go to your local SBDC.
Right. And they'll tell you.
Free resource full of business advisors just like us that are there waiting to tell you the information or
Right.
at least point you in the right direction for your specific state.
Right.
So for New York,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say?
New York State is openbooknewyork.com.
Look at that.
And for New York City, it's checkbooknyc.com, I believe, or .gov or .nyc, but Checkbook
I
NYC.
guarantee- you guys can figure it out. I
Yes.
trust you. I have faith.
Yeah, so that's on the local level for New York. But again, every state will have their own site.
Is there a way to validate government needs outside of like being creative, using deductive reasoning, seeing what they're like? Is there a system, or what strategy would you use to for somebody that maybe already has a business? Doesn't really matter. Maybe they don't, and they're trying to build one with the end goal of doing it. They hear what you said. They're like, okay, I'll go into business for a year. And I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to do the work 1 year, 2 years, and then I want to start working with the government. But I want to make sure that I'm building everything in such a way that it's going to fulfill a need. So I want to figure out what the needs are.
Yeah.
What strategies would you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, you can research what contracts are out there currently, what has been in the past through usaspending.gov or one of those websites, and also what's going to be released in the future. So there's procurement forecasts that are released in the next 6 to 12 months.
Hello.
And the federal government, they have to do this. So all of this information is there. So you can kind of build a strategy out from that information, the past, the present, and the future of what is going to become available. And that's where I would start.
Oh my God. Like, yeah. They're giving you the answers.
Right.
And so you can check out the forecast. And knowing the forecast, and especially don't discount the past.
Right.
You know, and if you can see an alignment, if you're going to be doing your homework, look at the past, look at the future, see where there's this kind of alignment, and you can see numbers, especially if you go back a little bit further in the past. You go back 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and if you can identify trends,
Right.
like, oh, there's more, and then there was more purchased, so this is a growing part of this. I wonder how I can support that.
Right. Right.
Um,
Absolutely.
and that can go into a component of it too. How would that work, or would this fall into government procurement? Would it be a sort of subcontracting situation? If you've identified somebody who's continuing to fill this need that keeps getting larger, and you want to support that company.
Right. Like if you are in an industry where you're seeing all these contracts are being awarded to the same company, that's an opportunity for you to then research that company and say, okay, how do I get in touch with them? Do they have a vendor portal? Do they have supplier diversity programs?
Right.
What kind of suppliers are they looking for? Are they having events where I can go and meet with them and talk to them? You know, a lot of these large companies that are fulfilling government contracts, they have departments dedicated to supplier diversity.
Yeah.
So like a Lockheed Martin, right? That's a huge government supplier.
And this goes back to, if we go back to the initial statistics we were talking about in the beginning, just on the federal side, if you look at a video that we just released where we talked about the percentage of small businesses and large businesses and medium size, we put that together. So 99.9% of businesses in the United States are small businesses. And then you take the stat that we talked about in the beginning, 25 or 26.5, 26.3% were awarded government contracts.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very interesting dichotomy there.
Right.
That means that the 0.01% of businesses are getting 75% of the government contracts.
Right.
And so you have to look for your way to, how do I kind of hitch my wagon, at least starting off? Like, how do I hitch my wagon to some of these big players? And I think that that's a brilliant strategy to look at, and especially, again, step outside and look around you.
Right.
Like, who's delivering, like what trucks are going on to the military base. Now, I don't recommend that you scout outside of a military base and you're writing down the names of the companies of the trucks that are coming.
Don't want anyone to get arrested here.
Yeah, that has been a problem in the past. I remember in North Carolina, there was a particularly fun. Anyway, so don't do that. But that's why the internet exists, and again, that's why the SBDC is there.
Right, right. And I know we keep harping on this research component, but it is such an important part. And we're going to be talking about it more when we talk about marketing to the government, because it's absolutely tied in. Instead of trying to figure out of the thousands of agencies, you know, going to each one and trying to talk to them and learn how to do business with them, maybe narrow it down to 5 that you know are buying your good or service, or 5 large companies that are selling to the government and focusing on them. It makes it so much easier.
And there's something that I think a lot of people miss, and there may be a psychological component of this, where if you're in the beginning stages of your business, you don't really want to be too open with people around you about it because you're scared of failing. But what you're doing is that you're cutting yourself off from all of what I like to refer to, and it's becoming more popular, are like your warm leads, your warm connections to people that you didn't know that they were connected with. And by not communicating with your close friends, with your family about the business that you're starting, then there's no opportunity for them to say, oh, I actually know somebody that works at Merck, I forget the name of the big transportation company with all the connexes. But yeah, so, or any of these companies that are doing business, or like, oh, I have a cousin that's in the military. Like, how many people, if you live relatively close to a military base, what degree of separation are you from people that actually work on base?
Right.
And then what's the likelihood that you could like come over for dinner and like just join into this shared event, and your friend can let them know, and you can have this conversation with them. Like, who provides these services? Like, if you already know the industry that you want to operate in, like, who's the vendors? Like, how do you guys figure this out? And you can just start talking to people on the inside.
Right. Like, talking to people is the most important thing. And I think we also get scared, or we think that, you know, governments are, you know, not people, right? Like, we get nervous when we think about the government. There are these like big buildings, and they're just filled with desks and cubicles, and they're not actually filled with humans, right? But they're humans.
Turns out. It's all humans.
Yes. And they're just like you and me.
Personal relationships.
Personal relationships. They want to be reassured that you're going to be doing the work and that you're going to be successful and they could rely on you. Right. These are, it's not just who has the lowest price or who has a certification. They want, when they're awarding you a contract, they want to make sure that they are responsible to the taxpayer and that it's going to get done.
Yeah, I remember I was in intelligence when I was in the Army, and I was tasked with the responsibility of going through our own internal system because the total amount was going to be under a certain amount. So it goes into these like sole or set aside contracts. And they're like, you just figure it out and you just tell us what you want to do. And so, but they're like, you have to court 3 businesses. And it was all for this giant security upgrade to our building. And that's the energy that I felt. I didn't know anybody, and nobody I knew anybody in these businesses. But guess what my first action was to find that out. I went to everyone in the unit. I was like, hey, have you guys ever worked? I went to my contacts in my network. That's where I went first. I didn't go online first. I went to my network because there's a certain aspect. It goes back to the expression of nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. Very old expression, but the idea behind it is that IBMs are not the best. During that time, they were not the best computer, and the system could be filled with bugs and all this stuff. But every business down that street was filled with IBMs, and so it's like if you're buying the thing that everyone else is buying, you're going off like the social proof aspect.
Yeah,
and you're safe because they're not going to be like, oh, it's your fault because you got IBM. They're like, oh, it's IBM's fault.
Right.
But if you went and got this new latest cutting edge technology and you brought it in and there was a 10th of the glitches, then like, this is your fault because you brought it in. Yeah. And so that's it was the same strategy that it was for me on the inside looking for a company to fill this out. I was like, I want other people who have already done work with the company and feel good about the work that was done there.
Yeah.
And then that turned into nobody, right? Nobody in that area. Cause this was brand new. Like this wasn't done at this level before. And so I brought 3 different companies in, and really what it came down to, the price wasn't the main factor. It was like you have this much money, essentially, like do with it what you will. And so I brought them all in. They all came in. They did a walkthrough. They did the quote, and it was the person that I felt most connected to by the end of it. And I was like, it's that guy.
Yeah.
And they're like, and I don't remember. I honestly don't even remember where he was on the list of 3 when it comes to price. It wasn't relevant. It was just like, I trust this person.
Right. And there is that aspect of it. Of course, when you're dealing with larger bids, they're not going to be, it's more regulated.
Yes.
And they will be looking at set standards and price. But at the end of the day, your bid has to, in your proposal, it has to shine through that you are a responsible vendor. You know what you're doing. A big thing in government contracting is being responsible and responsive. That is something that if you're entering the government contracting space, you will see all the time. Responsive and responsible, meaning that you will be responsive in your bid. You're going to answer all the questions. You're going to be complete and thorough in your response, but also be responsible on the job site or when you're delivering the goods. Yep. You are going to be on time. You are going to have the right amount of product, or you're going to be having the right amount of staff to fulfill the service.
Yes.
And so you need to make sure that as a business, you are able, on every contract that you bid for, you're responsive and responsible, because 100%. Every bid will lead to another one if you do well. Yeah,
if you do, because then you build that good rapport. And when some dude named Matt is calling his buddies and that have done work looking for this job, then they've done work with you, and then you're gonna get recommended internally.
Right.
And there's so much power in that. Yeah. And so you always have to look at that quality of work. And I will say, I'll call out my fellow veteran business owners and entrepreneurs in the government space here in New York, that the number one complaint that the big dogs, that 0.01% that are getting the prime contracts and are looking for subs, they're reaching out. I don't want to hear the complaints about they don't reach out to me. They're reaching out to companies to service disabled veteran-owned small businesses in the state of New York, which we're going to dive into in a future episode about the certifications. And they're not responding. Like the veterans are not responding to them reaching out and trying to get them on to meet their certain criteria for the STVOB and the percentages required, and they're not responding.
Yeah.
And so, like, to your point, you have to be responsive,
Yes.
even if the answer is no.
Right.
Like, talk to them,
Right.
be honest, tell them what the situation is, and then that level of communication, even that saying, I'm not ready for this level of job. I'm here, I'm doing these jobs right now. This is what I'm capable to do. Maybe in the next year, I would be able to, I'm looking to grow to that position within the next 12 to 18 months. That level of communication, given the landscape specifically in New York, given the landscape here, that's going to set you apart from everyone else because no one else is responding. And you were clear and concise and logical and transparent, and that builds trust.
Exactly. And you never know if that could lead to something else because you may say, I'm not ready yet. And they may say, well, we need you. We need your certification. I mean, it is what it is. Maybe we'll chop off some of this work for you and make it smaller.
What's within your scope?
What's within your scope?
Yeah,
or maybe we can help you. Right. So you never know. And you have to respond. You have to. Because if you don't, there are some agencies, if they send you a bid and you don't respond back 3 times, they're not going to send you a bid anymore.
Exactly.
They keep track.
Exactly. That goes back to like the black mark blacklisting in this space.
Small world.
It is. And that's why all of it from Jump Street, from the response, and being responsive to your point of responsive, responsible. Because it's one thing, you can have great rapport, you could have built that trust, and then you show up and I was going to say bad words. You show up and you do work that's not very good, below the expectation and standard of the contract. And you have to keep coming back out for repairs when the timeline should be done, and other people are waiting to start their work until you get yours done, and it can mess up the whole contract. And then that's a different type of blacklist.
Right.
That's you lose those recommendations to other people. You lose that future work with that prime contractor for the next one.
Right.
It's rough.
And the what we said in the beginning of like, what is this about? This is about making the government your customer. Right. Ultimately, they are the customer. And you want to treat them as such. They're not here to help you. They're not here to be nice. Right. They want you to come in and get out and do your work. And so if you have that mindset, I think it makes things a little bit easier for you because you're not here you're not doing the work to say, oh, they need to help me or they need to give me more jobs, right? You're doing the work because they are the customer and they are always right.
It is an interesting, that's another, it's a mental roadblock that I think people have because when a lot of people think about the government, they think about government services. Right. And so as you go in to do this work, and if that's your relationship or your understanding, of a big part of it, which, I mean, how many services are provided by the government? A lot.
Right.
And so you go in and you're like, well, this is a different relationship than it is if I'm, selling my services to another business. And what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is no, it's not.
It's not. And every aspect of the bidding process, the bid is released, there's a question and answer session, you respond, you're evaluated, you're interviewed, you perform the work, you do maybe a few contract modifications. Every interaction you have with this government agency is part of a larger interview process where they're going to assess if they're going to use you again. Right? So you really have to go in with that mindset of every time I put in a bid, it has to be well written. Every time I speak to the agency, I have to speak with knowledge and authority. Mm-hmm. If I have contract modifications, they're legitimate and they're maybe were unforeseen. They're not just like, oh, I forgot to put in this or I forgot to put in that.
And that's why it's so important to bring in the diverse level of expertise from your team, from your company and organization to the table when you're getting ready to put these bids out. If you're going to bid on a contract, you want to make sure that all the minds are kind of aligned. And because if you segment it and you say, okay, well, we're putting this bid out, I'm going to throw this to my engineering department, I'm going to throw these to my suppliers, whatever, and they're all going to put their information in and their tidbits into this separately without a sort of connected nature of a review, it can make sense in its little pockets, but cohesively across the board, it doesn't make any sense. It's jumbled. It's like all the puzzle pieces are there, but they're not in the right order. They're not connecting to each other. There's not a relation. You're not anticipating the relationship between each of these different components that you have to be preparing for.
Right.
And goes to your point of being ready to speak with a level of confidence and expertise, which if you're not bringing that team together,
Right.
then it's going to be very hard to do that.
And that's, again, going back to the foundation, why you have to have that year in business. It's just the most important thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're not going to play the game, but we're going to do something similar. So I just want you to answer the question. Don't worry about
Yeah.
Okay. So if I were somebody who was not in the government contracting space, and I was just starting to conceive of an idea that I want to sell to the government, that is the goal of my business, what's the first thing that you would tell them to do?
Research, because that's the beauty of government contracting. Everything is online and everything is public. So you could see what was released in the past, what's currently being released by the government, and what's going to be released in the future. And you can see from there the trends of what the government is buying, who are your competitors, and what you should be selling. Like what and at what level, right? Are you going to be selling large quantities, small quantities? What is the buying cycle? Are most of these goods or services being sold in the fall, spring, all throughout the year? It gives you so much information.
Incredible. And I think, would you give any sort of different advice to somebody that's already up and running in business?
No.
Seems like it would be the same.
The same.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
brilliant.
you have to.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This was phenomenal. Was there anything else?
Well,
Please, let's go.
I just feel, I don't want people to feel discouraged getting into this, because I know this video is not going to be like some of the other videos out there where I'm not telling you you're going to make $1 million tomorrow if you get certified, or if you go online and you look for a bid. We are here at the SBDC to give you realistic advice. This procurement series is here to help businesses understand what they need to do. So I hope that people don't feel discouraged, but it is a long road. It's not something that happens overnight, but if you keep at it and you're persistent, you will find success.
And I think that's such a good point. And I think that this will probably be one of the most discouraging, if not the most discouraging video in this series. And so if you stuck around for this, then the next ones are going to be a lot more tactical. They're going to be like, you have like what are some of the things that we're going to cover? I know this is going to be a lot of Matt and Lauren coming up.
Yes. They better get used to us.
Yeah, that's right.
We're going to be talking about certifications.
Yes.
So there's a lot of government programs that are there for businesses that are disadvantaged, women minority owned, or they live in a certain area that's disadvantaged.
8A, all these. So we'll be able to break all of these down so that you understand what the differences are if they apply to your business.
Right. We're going to be talking about marketing to the government. What are some effective marketing strategies so you can get in front of the agencies? And we're also going to be talking about how to respond to RFPs, requests for proposals.
Wow,
so
that's
some best practices.
Good one. That's
Yes.
going to be a good one. And the perhaps, maybe it's not the most, but it's pretty close to the top. The most commonly asked questions. How do I create my capability statement?
Right.
So we're going to do a very special episode on that one.
Yes.